At just 2 years old, a boy from Louisiana began waking up in the middle of the night screaming, "Airplane crash, plane on fire, little man can't get out." But what if these weren't just nightmares? What if he was remembering a death that wasn't his own? There are stories that make you question reality. Then there are those that challenge the very boundaries of life and death. This is one of them. The case of James Leininger isn't just a paranormal footnote or a fringe theory, it's one of the most thoroughly documented and mind-bending claims of reincarnation the modern world has ever seen. A toddler with no military background starts naming World War II aircraft, talking about aircraft carriers, and even identifying real historical figures with uncanny accuracy. Was this all a strange coincidence? Or was James remembering a past life? James Leininger was born in April 1998. Like most toddlers, he was full of energy and curiosity. But around the age of 2, something changed. He began experiencing terrifying nightmares, always about a plane crash. Scream about being trapped in a burning cockpit, thrashing in bed and crying out in ways that terrified his parents, Bruce and Andrea Leininger. One night, Andrea recalls James shouting the words, "Plane crash, on fire, little man can't get out." At first, they chalked it up to a phase, but what followed couldn't be explained. James started to draw planes, but not like a child would. He added detailed features, exhaust ports, bomb doors, and exact cockpit layouts. When asked what kind of plane he was flying, James answered, without hesitation, a Corsair. How could a 2-year-old know the name of a World War II fighter aircraft that even most adults have never heard of? Then came another chilling moment. When shown a picture of a World War II aircraft carrier, James pointed and said, "That's where my plane took off from. Natoma, the USS Natoma Bay, an actual escort carrier from the Second World War." How could James know that? Bruce Leininger, a deeply skeptical man, began to investigate. During one of their conversations, James casually mentioned the name of a man who was his friend in the war, Jack Larson. Bruce researched the USS Natoma Bay and was stunned to find Jack Larson listed on its crew roster. But it gets deeper. James also spoke about being shot down during a mission near Iwo Jima. And then he said this, "My plane was hit. I got shot in the engine. It exploded and crashed in the water." He said his name was James. James, who, eventually, through military archives and records, Bruce found a man named James M. Houston Jr. He had died in action during World War II. He was a fighter pilot, flying a Corsair from the USS Natoma Bay. The similarities were shocking. James Houston died near Iwo Jima. He flew the same aircraft James Leininger described. He had a close friend on board named Jack Larson. And here was this boy born decades later accurately recounting each of these facts. Could this really be reincarnation? At first, the Leiningers kept their findings quiet, but as James' memories became more detailed, they reached out to experts. Dr. Jim Tucker from the University of Virginia, a child psychologist who studies past life memories in children, began examining James' case. He called it one of the most compelling he'd ever encountered. But skeptics still weren't convinced. Was there a possibility of James being coached? Had he seen war documentaries? Bruce swore that none of that had happened. The family wasn't even interested in history. James often acted out scenes from World War II. He would pretend to crash a plane, dive under furniture, and yell military phrases. He once told his mother, while playing with toy airplanes, "Mommy, that's the kind of plane I flew, but they used to get flat tires all the time." He later discovered that Corsair planes had notorious issues with tires during landings. Again, information no toddler should know. In 2003, the Leiningers traveled to a reunion of the Natoma Bay veterans. James, the young boy, was introduced to many of the surviving men. He recognized them, called them by name, and he told stories only they would know. They were shaken. One veteran reportedly said, "There's no way that kid could know that. No way." Could the soul survive death? Is memory deeper than biology? How can a child describe the moment of his own death, decades before he was born? Skeptics argued coincidence, but the evidence stacked against doubt. Why would a child fabricate such a tale? And how could he be accurate about aircraft mechanics, pilot routines, and even historical details never published publicly? As James grew older, the memories began to fade. By the time he was 10, he remembered very little of his past life. Dr. Tucker notes that this is common. Children often lose these memories as their current identity solidifies. But for a few brief years, it was as if James Houston had returned, just long enough to finish telling his story. So what do we make of all this? Is James Leininger living proof that death is not the end? Or is the human mind simply more powerful and mysterious than we can understand? In a world where science demands evidence, and the spiritual demands faith, James' story floats eerily in the middle. An enigma, a whisper from another life. And maybe, just maybe, a glimpse of what comes next. If you found this story haunting, fascinating, or just too strange to ignore, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Because there are more stories like this one. Stories that don't just ask questions. They change the way we see everything.